I love my brokers before I say this, but there is not one broker that's going to work harder than me to lease that out. There's not one broker that's going to look at the listings every single day and tweak it to how it needs to be tweaked. And there's not a broker that's going to answer 50 spam messages. I don't care if they're spam, I'm going to answer them.
If you're an active real estate investor and you're looking to do larger deals, you're in the right place. We are going to go and take the conceptual type of stuff that you listen to from other real estate podcasts and bring it down to the tactical, the nitty gritty, the actual actionable types of things that other real estate investors that went big did to grow their own real estate empire. You're listening to the Go Big Live podcast. I'm your host, Matt Druin. Hey, what is up, everyone? I am Matt Druin. I'm the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors podcast. I am psyched out of my mind today to have a very special guest on with me, Mr. Josh Rosenberg, aka Rosie. Josh was first introduced to the world of real estate by his father. After just a few years in the single family space, he transitioned to focus on education through his company, Rosie Real Estate, a combination of holding, property management, and lending companies. He is young and already conquering the real estate space. So I am excited to dive into his origin story and his first big deal, monster deal. I want to talk about it. Don't want to, get into too much details here. So welcome on the show, Josh. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Doozy of a first question, as you said in the green room. You were born and now you're here. What happened in between?
It is a doozy of a question. So I was born and raised on Long Island. I still live on Long Island. Following high school, I went to SUNY Maritime. I went for 2 years. Then I worked on oil tankers for the next 5 years. But in that time period, I would say late 2018, I started investing up in Rochester. So from 2018 to 2022, it was all single families, small multifamilies. And then the beginning of this year, I finally took that leap and jumped in the industrial space.
So let me ask you this, because I've talked to my uncle is also a former merchant marine, and about your experience on those, tanker ships. It's definitely a unique experience to be on something like that and also have a lot of time. At least that's what my uncle said, is that, there was moments of chaos followed by moments of a lot of downtime and that sort of thing. What did you think about during your time on those tanker ships?
Probably real estate 95% of the time. To give you an idea, I was on an ATB, so I was the only person in the wheelhouse when I was up there.
Mm-hmm.
I would be up there for anywhere between 4 and 6 hours. And when you're out at sea, there's zero to look at. You're watching the flying fish fly by and maybe a couple birds that hitch the ride, dive in the water. But besides that, there is nothing out there.
Mm-hmm.
And to add, I'm on autopilot, so I'm checking, but there's not much you can.
Yeah. So besides your dad, what got you thinking about real estate? Or was was that sort of the tipping point in terms of his experience in it, what you saw it did for your family, and then kind of going down the rabbit hole from there? Tell me about that.
It was 100% my dad. He was buying properties when I was young. He passed when I was 8. And when he passed, I think he had around 9 properties, and my mom would sell them all to live if she needed money.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I was around 12, his business partner said to me, "Oh, if your dad was alive, we'd all be millionaires."
Mm-hmm.
So you're 12 years old. My whole life, I'm going through the properties. And then when he said that to me, it was just like a rocket ship. That was game over. I was obsessed.
Now, so let's fast forward a little bit. You have a background in single family, small multifamily. I guess what was the turning point in terms of why you got to be thinking around doing something different? I mean, I know that you and I have known each other for a while. I've known the trials and tribulations you've gone through in terms of residential and that sort of thing. So tell me about how the wheels started turning for you in terms of thinking about bigger deals. Because a lot of people get stuck in that, deal junkie, single family, small multifamily space. But there must have been something that happened or a collection of things that happened that caused you to create those thoughts for yourself.
It was definitely a collective of things. So for 4 years, I was buying 1 or 2 properties a month, and I would sell them here and there, mostly single families. And in 2019, early 2019, it was decent. Everyone was paying. And then when COVID came, it just completely exposed my business model. A lot of the properties I was buying were low income areas. And these are the people that got affected the most, which means I got affected the most. And I had so many people. I mean, at the peak, I probably had 60% of my tenants not paying.
Mm-hmm.
I still tried to fight through that and said, oh, maybe I'll buy a little bit nicer or I'll just buy more. And the more, the better. So I did that for 2 years. And then finally this year, it was like you look in the mirror one day and you're like, what am I doing? And that was really it. I knew I couldn't continue doing what I was doing.
So you started thinking about going bigger, from that to industrial. Is that when and early on in our conversations, because for people that don't know here, Josh is one of our founding father members of the Go Big Mastermind here. So I was early on in these conversations. And so tell people about what caused you to start thinking about industrial, for instance, as a chosen asset class.
Industrial made the most sense because I'm a blue collar guy. While I was working on the ships, I was doing dock building and carpentry work. And I could relate to that tenant base. Mostly small bay industrial. I haven't really stepped into like single use buildings. Everything I have is really multi-tenanted industrial buildings.
Excellent. So let me ask you this. In terms of the industrial side of things, how did you start really educating yourself around that asset class to figure out, okay, this is something that could work for me? Was there any inspiring stories to you that happened where you're like, damn, like that was a great deal that person did. I'm so jealous. I wish I could have done that.
The one that comes to mind is Bob Napier with his building. He
Mhm.
bought a pretty rundown building and filled it up with the same type of tenants I'm putting in my building. But really, most of the learning just came from doing it. We walked through the building together and we were spitballing ideas, but I would say everything I learned was from when we put it under contract and the leasing period.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. I mean, your first deal, I'm not going to get into specifics. I want you to tell the story. So, your first big monster deal there. So, tell me about the origin of that deal, where it came about, just the specifics in terms of its size and all that sort of thing.
I so I looked at a building out in Sodus, New York with the broker. We go through the building, I offer what they want, and the seller essentially backed out. He goes, "Oh, I don't want to sell anymore."
Hmm.
I was pretty frustrated, and the broker said, "You know what? We've had this listing for a couple years. It's on and off the market. It just came back on. You want to check it out?"
Hmm.
So we looked at it. It was 132,000 square feet. It was mostly vacant. Only 4,000 square feet was occupied, and that tenant was there for 30 years, and I don't think they were paying for the last 20 years. I, on top of that, the building needed a good 60,000 square feet of roof. But when we walked through it, they were pretty flexible in price. They were willing to owner finance, and we just got it done.
Yeah. So, from walking the property to putting together an offer on it, you know, people, may appreciate that trying to get a bank loan on 100% economically vacant property is going to be a tall order when you're trying to deal with banks on that. So, how did you negotiate the deal, and how did you do that with the seller in regards to the seller financing on it?
So by the time that I finally got to the deal, like it was listed for 2 years, they wanted 900,000. I talked them down to 765,000, and they held half the note.
Hmm.
So essentially, when I started raising, I was looking for 450,000, which was not the easiest task.
Hmm.
And the seller financing, it's on a 3-year balloon, but the interest rate, off the top of my head, it's 5.1 or something in that ballpark.
Now, you had a $450,000 raise. Have you ever raised money like that before?
No, never. Everything I've raised a bunch of $100,000 raises, but nothing substantial from one single investor.
So tell me about that story. How was your process around, okay, you got this thing under contract. Maybe you were having some early on conversations with the potential investment partners. Just tell me about the story about that in terms of, how the process that you used to secure that commitment.
I'm always raising money. I love raising money. And when I put it under contract, I was 100% confident that it would be very easy. And I was wrong. uh, I reached out to probably 20 to 25 of my guys. And what I learned was the offering, which what I was offering, it didn't work. I tried to make it too complicated and it didn't work. After banging my head against the wall for a solid 2 months, I went to someone who I am a good friend, and we went back and forth for another couple months, and we finally locked up a deal. But getting everything in place was miserable. I love my lender. His lawyer was very difficult to deal with. There was way too many lawyers involved, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. So these like 20 to 30 relationships you had in terms of when you made these calls, like where did they come from, like from their inception? Maybe you did some deals with them before in terms of borrowing money from them, but tell me about like where those like they came from somewhere. They had to start from somewhere. So express where those came from.
Most of my private lenders came from people I've done work for. So, like, say someone needs a new dock, and then they ask me what I do for a living. They see the logo on the back of my truck, and I go, "Oh, I do dock work, but really I'm a real estate investor." And when you're at someone's house from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night for a couple months on end, they know you work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was probably 60% of those relationships. And then another 10% of those relationships came from family and friends. And then the other ones were referrals.
So for those of these people that are out here listening that don't know how to build a dock and don't have the privilege of hanging out for 12 hours building a dock and schmoozing with people that have waterfront property and stuff like that, what's your recommendations for how people can get started in terms of having those conversations and building their network of potential investment partners?
My In my opinion, I think the first few deals that you do, you should do it with a bank because you need some type of concept to go to these people. If I did it all over again, I would do the same thing. I would buy my first 2, 3 properties with a bank, and then I would go to family and friends. And once you pay a few people back, the referrals start to come in. And you can never go wrong taking someone out to dinner.
Mhm. Is that your chosen method of capital raising? Is the dinner route or what?
The dinner route is 100% what shows it out. I try to go on 2 to 3 dinners a week. And there's some weeks where I don't go on any, but then there are weeks where I go on 4 or 5. So
Hmm. Why do you think that it has worked so well for you?
I think because you have someone one-on-one, there's, they can pick up the phone and say, "Oh," or they can, but they're probably not going to pick up the phone and say, "Oh, I got to go somewhere." And when you're sitting with someone one-on-one, especially if you have a couple drinks, the conversation's flowing. It's like going on a date with the girl.
Hmm. Yeah. So how does that conversation typically go? I mean, I guess when you first ask somebody out for the date, like what is it like what are they expecting? Are they expecting I'm going out to dinner with Josh and I'm going to learn about what he's doing in real estate or what? Tell me about that.
Most of these start off as people that reach out to me that want to start buying real estate. A lot of people don't actually want to own the real estate. They think they want to own the real estate, but it's not a match. If I sit there and tell someone 10 of my problems and they say, "Oh, that's way too much for me," it's probably not a fit.
Hmm.
To add on to that, depending on what interest you're paying, the lenders make more money. They just don't generate well. But if they're just looking for cash flow, lending to me is better 10 out of 10 times.
So it starts off with a somebody that just wants to learn about real estate investing and wants to buy their own properties and that sort of thing. Tell me how it ends up transitioning into a actual, I don't want to call it pitch, but where oh, this is an aha moment where it's like, oh, I can actually have exposure to the real estate business without incurring all of the other brain damaging activities that happen that us operators face. Tell me about like how that transition happens over there. Cause I want to get a sense of like what somebody can use in terms of actionable type of things when if they're going to choose to use the route of having one-on-one conversations with potential investment partners.
I would say the biggest aha moment for them is when I say, "Hey, I pay out 10 to 12% interest only payments monthly. And if you lend me X, I'm going to give you X." I had this just 2 days ago. The guy, I don't think he had any intention of lending to me. We
Hmm.
started going over the numbers and he goes, "Wow, I have it in a CD right now for 4%." He goes, "That's a no-brainer to give it to you for 10 to 12%."
Mhm.
On top of that, we are friends and he trusts me. But when you sit down and look at the numbers, it is a no-brainer.
So how do you position yourself? Because I know that this is not a one and done deal. I want to take this, this a little bit further in terms of your business plan and execution on this property. So to date, but I kind of want to go harp on this a little bit because a lot of people are intimidated about raising capital, especially from friends and family and people in their network. They think that the idea of raising capital is, oh, well, I'm going to find a deal and then I'm going to put it on some like crowdfunding website, and then I'm automatically just going to get all the money I need to take this thing down. So how are you positioning yourself over the long term in terms of what your strategy is to continue expanding that bottleneck? Because if you don't keep expanding it, you're going to run out of money eventually.
Mhm.
So tell me about like what your long term strategies are around that, and the habits that you adopt going forward to make sure that you never have to pass on a life changing real estate opportunity.
I have a little bit of a different plan than most people when it comes to raising money.
Hmm.
I prefer to do business with people under 40.
Hmm.
These are people that I can relate to. On 40 is older than I am, but they're people I can relate to. And there are so many people 40 and under that are sitting on a lot of cash and they don't know what to do with it. Um, the apartment I'm sitting in right now is a good friend of mine, and he's a numbers guy. He is a very good friend of mine.
Hmm.
One day he'll be making several $1,000,000 a year.
Hmm.
Nothing is better than doing business with a friend.
Uh huh.
All of my lenders are good friends of mine. There's one of the things that I love doing most is there's about 5 to 10 of us. In this group, we're all under 30, and we get dinner once a month.
Hmm.
They're super high achievers. These guys are just starting out in their business, and they're already doing extremely well. We're gonna continue this relationship until we're old, you know? Except what I've run into in the past when I was borrowing from the retired people is they will allocate a certain percent to real estate. So when
Hmm.
I went to one of my favorite guys for my industrial park, and he said, "Hey, I own this much commercial real estate. I don't wanna lend on commercial real estate anymore. If you bring me a
Hmm.
residential deal, I'll go for it."
Hmm.
I will never have that argument with the guy that's under 30 years old.
Hmm.
So, long story short, my plan is just to keep these relationships young,
Hmm.
which has been that's been all my raising this year is people under 40, except for the big property, but he's still very young.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely counterintuitive. I think it's definitely smart because you're making investments into these relationships that are going to be, decades long, for instance. Truth be told, a lot of my investment partners are like, to be honest with you, they're 55 plus. So there's going to be a point in time when they are going to be like, okay, you want my money for 5 years? I don't even know if I'm going to be alive in 6 months. I can't tie this up for 5 years. So I definitely think it's very smart for you to do that in terms of relationships that have a very long runway. And as they get more successful, if they're high achievers, then they have more wealth within which to allocate to real estate over time. So I think that's super smart of you to do that. So let's take the next step on this deal in Phelps, New York. So you got under contract. You were highly confident that this person was going to do it. They had everybody. There's two types of attorneys in this world. We educate on this in the mastermind. There's deal makers and deal breakers. So you want to be working with deal makers when you're working with attorneys because they're a very important member of your team. It sounds like this attorney may have been a deal breaker, maybe a little bit of a ball buster and that sort of thing, which is okay. There's some attorneys, that's how they make their business in terms of litigation and all that stuff. So you kind of got through that. Tell me about the other challenges in this deal about bringing it to the closing table.
Bring the Bringing it to the closing table, the really only hurdle I had was the financing. The environmentals came back not 100% clean, but there were little things like there's a 55-gallon drum on the property. Of course, the mechanic shop is gonna have oil stains on it. It's been there for 30 years plus.
Hmm.
But besides the financing, the financing and the lawyers, of course, that was the big hurdle. the sellers were ready to go. So when we got everything ready, they were happy.
So you got this thing to the closing table. Tell me what happened from there in terms of the story of this deal.
I would say the story with the leasing started before we closed. We put in the contract that I could lease up the property before closing. Give me a really good head start. So I would say from May of this year up until the end of August, I had the chance to lease this without owning it. In that time period, we did okay. The challenge was, hey, I'm going to move into this space, but my roof is leaking. I would
Mhm,
say, okay, when I close on it, I'll do the roof.
mhm.
I had no clue when we were going to close. So a lot of that back and forth. Luckily, when I closed and started doing updates, these tenants would tell their friends, they would tell their friends. I got a lot of traction off Facebook, Craigslist, LoopNet, and the leasing kind of took off.
So let me ask you, why did you choose to do leasing yourself and not to have a broker handle it for you?
The I love my brokers before I say this, but there is not one broker that's going to work harder than me to lease that out. There's not one broker that's going to look at the listings every single day and tweak it to how it needs to be tweaked. And there's not a broker that's going to answer 50 spam messages. I don't care if they're spam, I'm going to answer them.
Mhm,
So, when you sell something on Facebook Marketplace and people say, hi, is it available?
mhm,
I've had 3 or 4 tenants. That's how the conversation started. And it's easy to just say, oh, that's just spam. But these are
mhm.
credible businesses.
Yeah, so I've never used Facebook Marketplace for commercial space. Tell me about how you utilize Facebook Marketplace in terms of how you like, because I mean, I know that there's housing that's done on Facebook Marketplace and Beanie Baby collections and that sort of thing. How did you categorize this on the marketplace so that people that were searching for commercial space could actually find it?
It went under miscellaneous, but in the headline is warehouse/industrial space. And because there's nobody else on Facebook Marketplace doing this, all the traffic was coming to me. Recently, there has been a couple of landlords of neighboring buildings that called me and said, hey, I see your space on Facebook. Is it working? And I'm like, it's doing okay. But now I see all their stuff on there too.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to believe that one thing is the reason why I share all of my secrets with everybody. There's no secrets in this business is because I know even if I share the secrets, like people are usually looking for or think that they're secrets because it's preventing them from taking action on something. And
Mhm.
then when you give them the answer, the secret, okay, I do it on Facebook Marketplace worked for me. I guarantee that person is not going to even utilize that advice that I gave them, and 2, not do it as well or consistently as I can. So, is that kind of like your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. Where these people go wrong is they put up a space and they say they put in the price $5 for $5 a square foot. A
Mhm.
lot of mom and pop operators don't know that. They would rather just say, okay, this is what your rent is every month, and that's what they're happy with. They're not looking for per square foot pricing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's one of the things that I think on, larger spaces, if you're doing single tenant, that lingo of PSF, price per square foot, is something that is used, but when you and I were talking about this deal in terms of the lease up play on it, I was like, dude, you're gonna have mom and pops like they just want to know what the price is. They don't want to know like, oh, is it double net, triple net, modified gross, and all this other stuff because all that stuff is like it's not in their lingo and it just sounds exotic to them. And the thing is that it gives you a competitive advantage with those customers because all the other brokers out there are doing the price per square foot and the triple net and the cam charges and all this other stuff. And, you're just having like, what's my price? Like, this is an operating expense of my business. I want to know what it is and not be like mystified by this through, I have to whip out a calculator to calculate my monthly rent. Like, no, I don't want to do that.
No, absolutely. And another challenge I had was everyone thought it'd be impossible to lease it up because of where it was.
Hmm.
It turned out that it was a fantastic location because of where the highway is.
Hmm.
You don't necessarily need to be in the heart of a city. You just need to have access to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've actually like benefited on this because I mean, I ran the metrics for this deal when we were first looking at it through CoStar, and I was skeptical about it first when you sent me the address. I was like, damn, like I've never even driven through Phelps before. And then I started doing the analytics on it. I was like, there is a incredible amount of unmet demand in this area. So that's the reason why I was like, yeah, Josh, I think this could be a home run. So take a step forward further with me on this deal. You had the option of pre-lease space on there. You closed on it. What has been your experience so far and where you're at on this deal right now?
So far, we're about 60% occupied. We have 13 tenants in there. We've done over 40,000 square feet of roof. And the experience has been great because in residential, there's always some type of animosity between the tenant and the landlord. Even if it's a good relationship, it takes one little tweak to throw everything off.
Mhm.
So far, all the tenants at my building, we have a great working relationship. If they need something, I'm there to take care of it, and they treat me great in return. You know, it's like having a bunch of friends. You don't want to use that term in business, but we all have really good relationships, and anything they need, I'm more than open to doing it.
So you got it up to 60% occupancy. What are you projecting this thing to do for you within the next like 12 months or so?
Within the next 12 months, I would say that I'm probably going to be around 90%. The hurdle I have now is that the winter's here, and we still have 10,000 square foot or so of roof to do in the last warehouse. And the last warehouse is 30,000 square feet. So that's where most of my vacancy is now. But where I bought it, the thing's a 22% cap rate right now.
Wow. So 22% cap rate. What do you think market cap rates are right now in terms of how much you've put, from what you bought it at and what you pushed the value to this date?
Conservatively, I think a 9 cap is appropriate for the building. It's an older building. However, it's in pretty good shape now that the roofs are done. There's nothing major going on there that needs to happen. And also the tenant base is solid. We have some larger operators, and even the mom and pop businesses, they've been around for 5 to 10 years and they have multiple employees. So it's, you're not getting your hillbilly run businesses.
So speaking of like, this experience, because we're wrapping up the recorded part of this show before we launch into the live Q&A. What did this deal do for you? Like, were you ever expecting I could buy a deal and add several $100,000 to my net worth within a matter of months? Like, tell me about like what this deal has done for you.
What it's done for me is realize that you only need one property to completely replace your income. There's so many people that you see say, oh, buy 10 houses and you're going to replace your income. That's not the case, first off. You're going to need a lot more than 10. And really, you only need one big one.
Excellent. So for those people that are listening that want to go big, that are experienced real estate investors that may have the experience in like single through four family, and they want to break into the big commercial space doing larger real estate deals, what's your advice for them?
Well, this is going to be a shameless plug for you, but what helped me a lot was hiring a real estate coach, which in this case is you. All I needed was that little bit of confidence, and that was my catalyst. And I think in most people's case, that's all I need is a little bit of confidence and to follow someone that's done it already.
Oh, well, thank you for the shameless plug. Yeah, I mean, I definitely the first time I hired a coach, it was very foreign to me because I was like, all right, my dad told me this was the idiot's business. Why do I need somebody else and pay them, for instance, to help me through this? And boy, did I get my teeth kicked in and throat stomped a lot, to the tune of several $100,000 and like money that actually like got set on fire based upon mistakes that I made that could have been easily avoided.
Mhm.
Not to mention that I probably missed on several seven figures. We're talking about millions of dollars worth of lost opportunity costs due to just doubt and uncertainty that you face when you're trying to do it on your own. So yeah, when I first hired my coach, I got addicted to doing that because I can take somebody, when they have decades of experience and bolt that value onto my team. That's like the greatest, most highly valuable form of leverage, way more valuable than bank leverage, for instance. So I totally agree. But thanks for the kind words, Josh. So hey, if you're listening out there in podcast land and you want to get in the live Q&A, ask your questions to Be Select Josh Rosenberg, aka Rosie, Gino Barbaro, Matt Faircloth, Ashley Kerr, Paula Nichols, Reed Goosens, Chris 70, Brian Burke. All these people out here are directly accessible to you on our show. In order to get on the exclusive access, you got to join the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Group on Facebook. Look it up, shoot an invite request in, and I'll let you into the group so you can get in on the podcast actually earlier, like today, rather than waiting several weeks for it to come out through Apple and Spotify. So that being said, I don't ask this often, but if you're enjoying this show, definitely give us a review, an honest review, whether we stink or whether you think that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. The number of reviews that we get out there is directly commensurate with the guests we can get on the show. We have guests that want to come on the show, but they want to get our number of ratings up. So definitely please help us out with that. I'd greatly appreciate it in terms of a exchange of value. For now, signing out. Thanks for coming on the show, Josh. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.